Welcome students to this session on gas exchange. The purpose of ventilation is gas exchange. At the end of the session, the student should be able to describe alveolar capillary membrane, diffusion between alveoli and blood, factors contributing to diffusion, diffusing capacity and ventilation perfusion ratio. This comes under the physiology competency 6.2. What is alveolar capillary membrane? In the lung, you have the alveoli with the alveolar ventilation. Surrounding this alveoli, you have the capillaries. So, oxygen from the alveoli has to enter into the blood vessel, that is your capillary, and from the capillaries, carbon dioxide has to move out into the alveoli. The respiratory membrane is the interface between the alveoli and the capillary. It is otherwise called as pulmonary membrane. The alveolar capillary membrane forms the blood gas interface. Diffusion of gases between the alveolar air and the pulmonary capillary blood takes place in this zone. It is a very thin membrane. The thickness ranges from 0.2 to 0.5 microns. The thickness is more only at the site of the nucleus, otherwise the thickness is around 0.2 to 0.4 only. The surface area is very vast, just imagine it is 70 meters square. The pulmonary capillaries at any given time will have a minimum of 60 ml of blood to a maximum of 140 ml of blood. The diameter of the capillaries is 5 micrometer. What is the diameter of the RBC? It is 7.2 microns. So, in the pulmonary capillaries, the RBCs will be just squeezed and the surface of the endothelium and the RBC membrane will be just very close to each other. There will be very less of plasma at the area of RBCs. The RBCs will be just squeezed within the pulmonary capillaries. So, coming to the respiratory membrane, what is the innermost lining of the alveoli? What is there in the inner side of the alveoli? You have surfactant. Then comes the alveolar epithelium. All epithelium will have a basement membrane. Then comes the interstitial space. Then comes the pulmonary capillary. This pulmonary capillary has an endothelium. This endothelium will also have a basement membrane. So, the layers are, first layer is the alveolar surfactant, then comes the alveolar epithelium, then the basement membrane of the alveolar epithelium, the interstitial space. In the interstitial space, you have a very thin layer of the interstitial tissue and very minimal amount of fluid, the basement membrane of capillary endothelium and the capillary endothelium per se. Then once it enters into the capillary endothelium, it has to pass through the plasma, red cell membrane, intraerythrocyte fluid, then go and bind with the hemoglobin molecule. So, what are all the factors that will affect the gas exchange? The characteristics of the alveolar capillary membrane will decide how much of air is going to move on either side. If the thickness of the membrane is more, then what will happen? Less amount of air only can diffuse. The surface area is very high, it is around 70 meters square, large surface area. So, the gas exchange will be very rapid. The pressure gradient on either side of the membrane will decide which gas is going to move in which direction. Oxygen concentration is more within the alveoli when compared to the venous blood. Here in the alveoli it is around 100, in the venous blood it is just 40. There is a gradient for movement from the alveoli into the blood. When you talk of carbon dioxide is very much soluble in the plasma. It is there, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the venous blood is 45 millimeters of mercury. In the alveoli it is less, it is around 40. So, the gradient, even though it is just 5, because of its high solubility, high rate of diffusion, it is easily moving from the blood into the alveoli. Third is the pulmonary capillary blood flow. We have already seen there are certain alveoli which does not have adequate pulmonary blood flow. If the pulmonary blood flow is not there, if there is no blood flow around the alveoli, what happens? The air is wasted. You call that as alveolar dead space. And the diffusing capacity of each gas. Each gas, namely your nitrogen has a different character, carbon dioxide and oxygen has different diffusing capacity. So depending upon the diffusing capacity, the gas exchange will be varying. Coming to the transport, if you see this graph, this is the duration of blood in the capillaries. It is less than 0.8 seconds. Okay. Here in the y-axis you have the partial pressure. You have carbon monoxide, you have oxygen, you have nitrous oxide. You have three gases. Okay. What do you understand by the term diffusion limited? When a gas is binding to hemoglobin, say carbon monoxide has high affinity to hemoglobin, what happens? The alveoli will have carbon monoxide. If the alveoli is going to have carbon monoxide, the hemoglobin is there in the blood. The affinity of carbon monoxide to hemoglobin is very, very high. So whenever carbon monoxide is available, carbon monoxide is not available in the blood. What happens? Carbon monoxide diffuses from the alveoli into the blood. Once it enters the blood, immediately it is going to be bind to the hemoglobin molecule. So as it is continuously binding with the hemoglobin molecule, there is no free carbon monoxide available in the plasma. The partial pressure of carbon monoxide in the blood will be very, very less. What is going to decide how much of carbon monoxide is going to move from the alveoli to the blood? It is the diffusion capacity of the membrane. Therefore, whenever a gas is binding to something, there is no change in the partial pressure of the gas in the blood. The gradient is maintained continuously. There is movement of carbon monoxide from the alveoli into the blood. So this movement is going to be decided only by the property of the respiratory membrane, which is going to permit the movement. So you call that as diffusion limited.